More people in the world drink tea than coffee. But which country drinks the most tea? And why do the British love it so much? And why do so many Brits drink tea with milk? You'll learn the answers to these questions and much more in this episode of
Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig.
Hi, I'm Reza.
And my name's Craig.
And with nearly 50 years of teaching experience between the two of us, we'll help you improve your English and take it to the next level. How are you, Craig?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing very, very well, I must say.
You fancy a cup of tea?
I do, but let's leave it to after the recording. Then we'll enjoy it more, yeah?
Okay. We're speaking about tea today, everything to do with tea. But before we look at some vocabulary connected to tea, let's look a little bit at the history of tea. Where does tea come from?
I know that tea definitely originated in China, where they still drink a lot today. Am I right?
Yes, it originated in China. But the Chinese per head of population do not drink the most tea. And you might be surprised which country, which nationality are the biggest tea drinkers in the world. Have a guess. Who do you think?
I don't think I need to guess.
You know.
Because I've been there.
Oh, you used to work in this country, didn't you?
Yeah, I know that in Turkey, they drink tea all day long. They never stop drinking tea.
In fact, more than 3 kilograms of tea are consumed by the Turkish per person per year, which is a lot of tea. They are the most prolific tea drinkers. They are the people who drink the most tea, followed in second place by Ireland, very close to us, and even closer to us in third place, United Kingdom, the Brits.
Yes, I knew that. That's a long-standing statistic. So the British rightly are famous for drinking tea, but the Irish drink even more. Don't forget the Irish, they drink even more than the British.
Might have something to do with the weather.
So how much do the British drink, Craig? How much tea do they drink?
Well, apparently they drink 165 million cups of tea every day. That's not every one person, that's the whole country.
I'm glad to hear it's not one person because they would be going to the toilet a lot.
So I don't know if you've heard of someone called Catherine of Braganza, but do you know what she has to do with the history of tea? She's originally from Portugal.
I've heard of the town of Braganza. I knew it was in Portugal, but I don't know what her connection is with tea.
Well, I didn't know either, but doing research for this podcast, Catherine of Braganza, she married King Charles II of Britain back in 1662. And old Catherine, she was quite a big tea drinker. She drank tea every day, and she brought that custom with her to Great Britain in 1662. And although in the beginning, initially, it was quite an expensive drink, not many people had the money to drink tea. Gradually, over time, the price decreased when more tea was imported to Britain. And gradually, everybody could afford to drink tea. And they did. So it was Catherine of Braganza who originally brought the custom of drinking tea to the UK.
And as you know, you can drink tea on your own, but it's also, like coffee, used very often in a social situation, as we all know. I'm sure you've met people before for a coffee or a tea. But did you know that the very first tea shop, so the tea equivalent of a cafe, the very first tea shop for ladies, specifically for ladies, was opened way back in 1717 by Thomas Twining.
And Twining teas are very famous. They're still sold today, Twining's teas. Do you like them?
Yes, they make good tea. Yeah.
Before we continue and speak about the health benefits of tea and particular famous teas, we'd like to take a tea break and talk about our sponsors, italki. Reza, what do you know about italki? What is it and how can it help our listeners?
italki is a place where you can have a teacher one-to-one and have a lesson via internet. So if it's on internet, obviously you can have it whenever you want. You decide when. You can also decide how much it's going to cost you. And perhaps most importantly of all, you can decide who the teacher is going to be. Because on italki, they have a big database of many, many teachers. And when you go to their website, you will see all the available teachers for the language or languages that you want to learn. You will see their profile, you will see their qualifications, their level of each language, how much they charge, and when they're free, available to teach. So using this information, you choose the teacher at the time you want, at the price you want, and you don't even have to leave the comfort of your own home.
And one big advantage about having such a huge variety, such a wide variety of teachers available, is that many teachers specialize in a particular area of English. So if you need business English, for example, or if you need English for academic purposes, or if you want a teacher with a particular accent or working on presentations, then you'll find teachers there that specialize in that particular area. So if you'd like more information, go to inglespodcast.com/273. And in the show notes to this episode, you will find an italki picture and link. Click on that, go to their website. When you sign up and pay for your first lesson with italki, they are offering a $10 credit for listeners of this podcast. And Reza and I would both like to thank italki for sponsoring Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig. What are the health benefits, Reza, of tea? Are there any?
There certainly are, and people have known that tea can make you feel good for a long, long time. Tea leaves, so a leaf, L-E-A-F, is hoja, and the plural leaves, L-E-A-V-E-S. Tea leaves are full of healthy antioxidants. In other words, they stop your skin aging. Well, they reduce the speed, I should say. They don't stop your skin aging, but they slow down the process. And they contain substances that reduce the risk of cancer and other diseases, such as diabetes and even heart disease. Tea is also said to reduce joint inflammation.
What are joints?
Joints are your articulations between your bones. So you could say articulation or joint. So when they get bigger and they're painful, that's joint inflammation. Tea can help reduce that. And it can also help lower cholesterol. It can encourage weight loss. And it sharpens and makes something more obvious. It sharpens your mental alertness. But be careful. Don't add too much sugar. Because, of course, some people take sugar in your tea. And sugar in high quantities is definitely bad for you.
So you said it encourages weight loss. I drink a lot of tea and I don't seem to be losing any weight. It might have something to do with the sugar I add to my tea, but more than likely it's probably the biscuits, las galletas, the biscuits I eat with my tea. And we did do an episode only about British biscuits. Go to inglespodcast.com/207 if you'd like to listen to that while you're drinking your tea. Reza, how do you like your tea? How do you take it?
Well, not the same as you, because I think you said you put sugar in your tea, right?
I do.
Not me.
But you put sugar in coffee?
Not usually, no.
Really?
No. I don't take sugar in tea ever. And I very rarely, almost never take sugar in coffee.
Has that always been the case?
Yeah. But I do usually like milk in coffee, and I definitely put milk in tea. Well, that depends. If it's black tea, we'll talk more about that in a minute.
Yeah.
So if it's typical British tea, I will have it with milk. Occasionally, though, particularly in the summer, if I fancy my tea cold,
Iced tea.
yeah, I pour it over ice, so it's very cold, and then I've got iced tea, and I will have that with a slice of lemon.
Very
and
nice.
No milk.
Yeah, lemon tea in the summer, very refreshing.
Have you ever heard of builder's tea?
That's my preferred way of drinking tea. Builder's tea tends to be very strong and not a lot of milk. Fairly sweet because I do add sugar, maybe 1 teaspoon or 1.5 teaspoons. And I like to drink it in a mug. A mug is generally bigger than a cup. It's a large cup with a handle. Handle. Handle is una asa.
There are some people, maybe they're a bit silly, such as my mother, who insists that tea should be drinking. Drinking?
Should be drinking?
Getrunken.
You have gone all German on me. What is das?
Tea is getrunken with the... I don't know why. My mum is not German, though. She is a bit silly, though. But some silly people who are a bit old-fashioned, like my mum, insist, proper tea must be drunk with a cup and a saucer.
What's property?
Property, realty, not some cheap...
Not property immobiliario.
Oh, no, right. Right, property. Sounds like propiedad, doesn't it? Property.
It's my property.
Yeah. I think we've talked about this before. Look, and it's happened when two words in English seem to join into one. Property sounds the same as proper tea. Yeah.
Realty.
Realty. Yeah. Should be.
Realty is also property.
Yeah, I just thought that. Realty is property, yeah.
Realty is immobiliario as well. Realty.
We're digging ourselves into a hole here. We're going to be totally misunderstood. No, honestly, we're not talking about
Houses.
property or houses. We're talking about good old British tea. My mum likes what she calls proper real tea, which should be served always in a cup and saucer, according to her. No mugs. I prefer it in a mug myself, but that's mothers for you. What can you do?
What can you do? So, saucer in Spanish, is that plato?
Plato or platito?
Platito, under the cup. You put the saucer, cup and saucer. No. That's a very strong collocation, cup and saucer.
I can't resist a little joke here, a little cultural joke. For Spanish people, what's a saucer? A saucer is a thing that you put tapas on in Spain. Why? I don't know. But the number of times in Spain I've been served tapas on a saucer. And it really is a saucer. It's not just that it's a small plate. It's a small plate with a little groove, a little indentation, a circular indentation where you put the cup so that it doesn't move. That is what a saucer is. And believe me, it's something I've paid attention to many, many times. I've been served a tapa or a little piece of cake or something on a saucer in Spain. I don't know why, but it seems very common here that a lot of Spanish people don't think that saucers need to be strictly reserved to go with cups.
Maybe it's got something to do with the size, because small plates in Spain still tend to be a bit big for a small tapa, and a tapa originally was a small covering for the beer glass. So a saucer is more to the size of the top of a beer glass than a plate. Not sure, but I've noticed that as well. It's curious.
I have a challenge for our listeners. Next time you go out for tapas in Spain, see if you get served a tapa on a saucer. See if it happens to you.
Let's look at some famous teas, because there are several teas available on the market. And the first one we're going to look at is something you may have heard of, a type of tea that you may have heard of from India, from the northern part of India. That's where it grows. It's called Assam, Assam, Assam tea from northern India. I've had it. I like it. It tastes quite nice. It's fairly strong, isn't it?
Yeah, that would be your cup of tea, wouldn't it? because you like strong tea.
Yeah, and Reza said it's your cup of tea. He means it's something I like. If something's your cup of tea, that means you like it. So you could say, tennis is not my cup of tea, or I don't like swimming because I don't like getting wet. It's not my cup of tea, so you don't like it. But yeah, Assam is definitely my cup of tea, and so is English breakfast tea, which is also a very strong blend, mezcla, B-L-E-N-D, a strong blend of tea.
Yeah, there's no specific guidelines about what must be in English breakfast tea. You can put anything you want into English breakfast tea and sell it as English breakfast tea. You can't do that with Assam, for example. It would be illegal. If you're going to sell tea as a tea producer and you're calling it Assam tea, it has to be tea which was grown in Assam. Mm-hmm. But English breakfast can be anything you want.
As long as it's strong tea.
Well, in theory, but you could sell a really bad English breakfast tea which wasn't strong. You're not going to go to prison for it. But in theory, English breakfast tea should be a strong blend, and it traditionally tends to have Assam in it, mixed with other teas, which we'll talk about in a minute. But Assam is generally regarded to be a good type of tea to put in the blend for English breakfast tea.
There are some makes of English breakfast tea that I tasted in Spain that are not particularly strong, perhaps because the tea bag, the bolsa de té, the tea bag is quite small, and I find these sometimes in hotels in Spain that you have breakfast, and I usually put 2 tea bags in the cup because I need 2 tea bags to get a lot of flavour. Even though it's English breakfast, it's still not very strong.
Yeah, and also I think it's a question of taste. The Spanish, on the whole, aren't that keen on English breakfast tea. They like weaker blends, I think, in Spain. Would you say?
Yeah, maybe like Darjeeling, for example. That's a milder black tea. Mild is un poco más flojo.
Again, it's the name of an area in India, just like Assam. Darjeeling is a place in India where they grow that type of tea.
We mentioned before drinking tea without milk. There are some teas that are not really commonly drunk with milk, and one example of that is Earl Grey. Would you drink that with milk?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. For me, it's an in-between one. For me, Earl Grey is one which sometimes I fancy with a drop of milk. Una gotita.
A cloud of milk.
That's a good word. A cloud. Una nube.
Well,
Yeah.
put a cloud of milk in for me, or a drop.
Yeah, but sometimes I fancy it on its own black. What about you?
I'm not keen on Earl Grey. It's not my cup of tea. I don't really like the taste. I have drunk it, and I do drink it sometimes, but always with a drop of milk, because I like tea with milk.
Is Earl Grey not for you because of the flavour of the bergamot, the spice, the herb they put in it?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Also, I'm very set in my ways. If you're set in your ways, you're a creature of habit. You like things to stay the same. You don't like change. And I don't like changing, experimenting very much with tea. I like my tea strong and with milk and a little sweet, and that's how I like it. So anything different, I know it's not very adventurous, but I do enjoy my tea a particular way. So I'm not very good at experimenting with teas.
What about Ceylon tea, Craig? Do you know that and do you like it?
I've tasted it. It's from Sri Lanka, which used to be called Ceylon. The country of Sri Lanka changed its name. So the name of the tea stayed the same, but the name of the country changed from Ceylon to Sri Lanka. Yet it's not bad. What do you think? Do you like it?
I do like Ceylon. For me, it's a good tea to have in the middle of the day or perhaps even in the early evening because it's not as strong as Assam or English breakfast tea. And I like a strong cup of tea in the morning to wake me up.
Me too.
So I wouldn't have Ceylon first thing in the morning, but maybe a bit later in the day. And I would always put milk in it.
And you've mentioned some teas here that I haven't heard of. Are these teas that you've tasted or that are popular?
Which teas?
Kenyan and Kimun and Lapsang Souchong and Golden Monkey. I've never heard of any of those.
Oh, that's strange because you drink one of them every week of your life, I would say.
Really?
Yeah, I bet my life on it.
Well, it's not the Lapsang Souchong.
No, it's the Kenyan.
Ah,
Kenyan tea. I imagine it's pretty hard to drink tea, a lot black tea, and not drink Kenyan since they are the second or third exporters in the world.
so it's blended black tea.
Nearly all English breakfast tea has Kenyan in it these days. So
I did not know that.
pretty sure you've drunk a bit in your time.
I've probably got some here in the house.
You probably do. If it's English breakfast, it will have some Kenyan.
Some Kenyan and some Assam, you said.
Yeah, probably more Kenyan than Assam. Any idea why?
Because it's cheaper?
Yep. And because it's stronger. Kenyan is strong tea as well, so it adds a good base if you want a strong cup of tea and a good blend. It's unusual to see Kenyan bought much on its own outside Kenya. It's nearly always blended because it is a strong tea. So it works well as a good base for blends. It's a very, very, very widely drunk tea, but very often people don't know they're drinking it.
And is it true with blended teas that are a mixture of different types of tea in a tea bag? That means not loose in the packet, but in a tea bag. Are they not the full leaves? Do they kind of sweep the bits of leaf from the floor of the tea sorting plant and put kind of the rubbish in the tea bags that they don't use for other things? Is that true?
That's a rumor, isn't it?
It's a rumor.
I think it's probably false myself, but to be honest, I'm going to take a risk and say that I think it's inevitable that loose tea, loose, Loose, so not in a package, loose tea is always going to be better quality than tea in a tea bag for the simple reason that
You can see it.
You can see it.
Yeah.
And people can see what they're getting. In the tea bag, you can't see. It's not designed to be open. And I think a lot of tea bags use very inferior tea. Not all, but a lot of them do. And I think even the top makers, people like Twinings and Jacksons of Piccadilly and people like that, I bet they put their best tea into selling tea leaves loose, and they're not top of the range, they're second quality into bags. I would bet on that.
So when you buy tea, do you tend to use loose tea in the packet or tea bags?
It depends. If I'm in a hurry, tea bag because it's quicker. But if I want to take my time over it and the flavor is important to me, and particularly if it's a certain type of tea I want, like let's say a Lapsang Souchong that you mentioned, which is a smoked tea from the Fujian province of China. It's black tea. China's more famous for green tea, but Lapsang Souchong is a smoked tea. They actually smoke it. I don't mean they put it in
Not like marijuana.
No, I mean they use smoke to give it a special flavor. I would definitely buy that loose because I want to see what I'm getting. I wouldn't buy that in tea bags.
So if you smoked tea like marijuana, you'd be like a high tea, wouldn't it?
High tea. That's a good expression. High tea,
Not a tea high.
not a tea high. Well, you might get a tea high off it.
So high is to be colgado.
High tea is a very, very English thing, which I really like. It's a little meal you have, which is accompanied with a cup of tea, of course, but you also have food with it, but not a lot of food. It'll be a reasonably small meal, right?
Cucumber sandwich.
Cucumber sandwiches, maybe scones, maybe a
Scones.
sandwich or something like that. And you wash it down with tea, and that's high tea.
High tea.
Craig, have you ever seen a golden monkey?
I have in Japan. I think it's a breed of monkey.
Oh, it might be. Did you know it's also a type of tea?
I did not. Where's it from? Is
It's
it
a-
from Japan?
No, it's a black tea which, like Lapsang Souchong, also comes from the Fujian region, Fujian province, or Yunnan province of China.
Have you tasted it?
I've never tried it, no, but it's very widely drunk in China. And there's one more Chinese black tea I'd mention, which is Qimeng, which I have tried, which is very nice. It has a very particular, very delicate flavor. It's still black tea, but it's delicate black tea. And that's from Anhui in China.
I've heard that Chinese consider people like us who drink black tea as Philistines, that we're not cultured because we're drinking the black tea that's old and it's fermented and it's not fresh. And it's very common in China to drink green tea, which is fresher, isn't it?
But they do drink black tea as well in China. It's just their go-to. That means their everyday, their normal, their automatic choice of tea for most drinking would be green. But I've just mentioned 3 types of black tea which are drunk in China.
So green tea is not dried. It's just the leaf that's fresher and obviously greener and has a different taste as a result.
Yeah, basically black tea is when the green leaf dries and it oxidizes, so it goes black. That doesn't mean that the quality has deteriorated. It will just be a different taste. But as you say, they drink far more green tea in China. What I've heard is it's not so much the drinking of black tea, which the Chinese find repugnant. What they find repugnant more than anything is the idea of putting milk in tea.
Yeah.
The vast majority of Chinese people never put milk in tea, whether it's green or black. There are a few exceptions, like in Mongolia and the area near Tibet and around there, but the vast majority of Chinese people would find it abhorrent to put milk in tea.
Well, we'll speak a little later about why British people tend to like their tea with milk, but let's quickly give a couple of examples of green tea in case listeners are keen to try it.
Yes, a very well-known green tea from China is gunpowder. Have you tried that?
No, I haven't tried any of these. In fact, I haven't heard of them.
You never heard of gunpowder, no?
Nope.
It's called gunpowder because it's a tea leaf which is rolled, enrollado. It's rolled in a way so that it resembles old-fashioned gunpowder. The powder, or like little pellets almost, that they used to put in guns to make the flame so that a bullet would come out. There's a tea that kind of looks like that. So they call it gunpowder. That's a Chinese one. But for me, though, when I think of green tea, I probably think even more about Japan than China. I'm thinking of things like, have you heard of sencha green tea? That's a very popular Japanese leaf. Or a very, very popular one these days. It's become very trendy. It's become accepted into the capricious world of superfoods is matcha. Ever heard of matcha?
I hadn't, but reading and doing some research for this podcast, I did read a little bit about matcha on the website, and it seems to be very popular in the US now.
And the UK.
Entrepreneurs and people into health foods are drinking a lot of matcha, which is Japanese powdered tea. So they take the leaf, la hoja, and they crush it. They push it together so that it breaks into pieces and forms a powder, and the tea is made from the powder.
It's very popular in the UK as well now, drunk on its own, but even more popular being mixed with other products. For example, now in the UK you can find like health drinks, maybe a mixture of fruits, and they add matcha to it because it's a powdered tea. It's easy to mix with other things. So it's a very fashionable thing at the minute.
There are also white leaf teas that are not perhaps so popular as green teas and black teas, but the flavour is more delicate. It's más suave, more of a delicate flavour. So white leaf teas are also available.
Again, they would be drunk mostly in Japan and that part of the world. As you know, I'm sure, all of the listeners, in Japan and China, they have a tea ceremony where they take the making and drinking of tea very seriously. It has to be done in a very particular way. The blend of tea must be just right for the time of day and the particular occasion, and they take it very, very seriously.
Herbal teas are very popular in Spain, infusiones. It always makes me laugh when someone says, yo quiero una infusión, because I think of a slow injection, because a drip, un gotero, could be an infusion in English, an intravenous infusion of tea. That's what it reminds me of when I hear the word infusión. But that's herbal, a herbal tea. One example is chamomile. Is that the same in Spanish?
Yes, they say camomilla, don't they?
Yep.
Although I think it's pretty much the same as manzanilla también.
Manzanilla, I think it is.
Not much difference.
I think it's manzanilla. And there are others that we've listed on the website like mint and peppermint, etc. So if you'd like to look at a list of those, go to inglespodcast.com/273. But let's move on to how you can make a really good cup of tea. And for that, I defer to my good friend Reza, who makes a very good cup of tea. How do you do it? Let's look at some vocabulary involved, Reza, and maybe you could talk us through how you make a cup of tea. When you want to make a good cup, I'm guessing that you don't just throw a tea bag into a mug. You use a teapot, right?
Yes, so a teapot, la tetera. If you really want a good cup, it's got to be in a teapot. Even if you're just going to make one cup just for you, you should still use a teapot if you want to make it properly, because the tea does not brew. That means it doesn't get to the right strength unless you brew it properly in a teapot. So something that I almost never do is put a tea bag in a mug. That's something I virtually never do. I've done it no more than about 20 times in my entire life.
Is that because the flavour can't develop? There isn't enough space for the tea to brew?
And it'll be too strong, and it's just not nice. I really don't do that. Unless occasionally I've got no choice but to drink a bad tea with one of those little tea bags that are too small that Craig mentioned. So put that in a cup, and because they're not very strong, maybe, but it's not a very nice experience. So decide if you're going to use a tea bag or loose tea. It doesn't matter which. Both can go in a teapot. If you're going to use the loose tea, you're going to need a teaspoon, a small spoon, to measure how much tea you're going to use.
So is it 1 teaspoon per person?
That's what they say, but don't forget one for the pot.
1 for the pot. What does that mean?
So imagine 3 people are going to have tea, and you're going to make them a cup each, 3 cups. In that case, you put 4 teaspoons of tea, loose tea, in the teapot. 3 people plus 1 for the pot. That is the standard traditional measurement. So for 3 cups, put in 4 teaspoons. For 6 cups, put in 7 teaspoons.
I was surprised because I do have a teapot here in the house, but I don't use it very often. And once I made tea for you because you kindly brought me as a present from Belfast a lovely tea cozy. A tea cozy is kind of like a glove that you put, or a blanket that you put on top of the teapot. It fits over the teapot, and its purpose is to keep the tea warm and hot enough to drink while it's brewing, so you don't lose temperature of the tea. And it's a very attractive tea cozy. And when I made tea for us in the pot with a tea bag, I was surprised that I only really needed 1 tea bag to make 3 cups.
Oh, yeah. A tea bag goes much further in a teapot than if you put it into mugs.
So is that because there's more room for the flavour to develop?
Yeah. It's not the same if you put a tea bag in one mug, and then when you think it's strong enough, take it out and put it in a second mug, maybe the same tea bag, and add water. You could do that, but the tea will not taste as well, and it won't be the same. It's much better to just put it in a teapot.
That's how my parents used to make tea. Take it from one cup, put it to the next cup.
It'll be strong enough. It's not a question of it's going to taste too weak. It just isn't a very nice taste.
So before you put the tea in the teapot, there's an expression to warm the pot. And that means to put some just hot water in the teapot, just move the hot water around for a few seconds so that the teapot gets a nice temperature, a nice warm temperature inside, so that when you make the tea, it's not in a cold pot.
Exactly. And then me personally, I then throw out that water. You use that hot water to warm up the tea, and then pour, echar, P-O-U-R, pour it out of the spout. The spout is the bit where the tea comes out of.
And to pour is echar.
Echar. And by pouring it out the spout, you're heating up the spout. So there are differences of opinion, but generally they recommend once you've added hot water to the tea bag or the loose tea, leave it about 3 minutes to brew is generally the recommendation. If you want it stronger, leave it more. If you want it weaker, leave it less.
That's not a long time, 3 minutes.
No. Personally, I tend to leave a bit more. I would say I myself go for about 4 minutes, but 3 is the average standard.
So after that time, you pour the tea from the teapot into the teacup and add milk and sugar, depending on if you want milk and sugar.
Ah, do you now? Because there's debate over that. Or do you add the milk first?
Well, I always add my milk after. What about you?
Me too. But there are a few people who put the milk in first as well.
And there's also a question of why Brits drink tea with milk, because in Spain, for example, it's very common to drink black tea, especially herbal tea. But in Britain, it's unusual unless you're drinking it with lemon. So on the internet, I found some reasons for drinking tea with milk, and I'd like to see if you've heard of any of these, Reza, and if you agree with any of them that they could be the reason why we've accepted drinking tea with milk. One explanation is to stop the cup from cracking. A crack is grieta. So if the expensive china cups, the very expensive porcelain cups, have boiling hot tea poured into them, they may crack. And maybe years ago, to lower the temperature of the tea and hot water, milk was added to the cup first before the tea went in. What do you think of that idea?
It's a possibility. Scientifically, it makes sense. The slightly cooler milk will take away from the impact of the hot tea. It makes sense. Who knows? It might be true.
I used to just put a teaspoon in the cup, and then the teaspoon takes the temperature away from the hot tea as well. So that stops the cup from cracking. Another explanation, porcelain, China porcelain, used to be very white, very clean, and maybe putting the milk in stops the porcelain from getting stained by the tea. To stain is manchar. So to stop the discoloration of the porcelain, milk was added first, which is also logical.
That makes sense. It could be.
What other explanations could there be?
Simply to make the tea a bit weaker, because by adding milk, which has not been brewed with the tea, you're simply diluting. That means to make weaker. To dilute, D-I-L-U-T-E. You're diluting the strength of the tea a little bit, so it's making it a little bit weaker. I say the milk is not brewed with the tea, except sometimes in India and Pakistan, they do make a type of tea where they brew the tea with the milk.
Chai.
Yeah.
And also when tea started to become popular, its popularity spread because of Indian colonialism. So because a lot of English people were drinking tea in India, then the popularity of tea spread at the end of the 1800s. So maybe because of the fact that in India people drank tea with milk, that spread then back to the UK. That's another explanation.
And by the way, a lot of the tea in India, most of the tea in India originally didn't grow there. It originally grew in China.
Was it the British who planted it in the north?
British planted it and it became really popular, partly because the land and the atmospheric conditions were perfect for growing tea.
And the altitude in the north as well.
Altitude is very good for tea as well.
Yeah.
And the tea immediately grew very successfully in India, but it originally mostly came from China.
Mm-hmm. Other possible reasons why we drink tea with milk? Well, originally tea was quite expensive. When it first started coming over from China, it was expensive to send it on boats, and only the rich people could drink it, and gradually poorer people started getting access to tea. But milk was fairly cheap because a lot of people had cows in the countryside. So maybe in the beginning they were drinking a lot of milk with just a little bit of that expensive tea inside. And they were diluting the tea with a lot of milk. Could be another explanation why British people drink milk with tea. So no one really seems not very clear why Brits drink tea with milk. What's your personal opinion? Do any of these ideas sound true to you?
I've honestly no idea. Any of them could be true. They all sound plausible. They could be true. I really don't know. By the way, I'd also be interested to know why British, Spanish, and in fact the entire world often put milk in coffee. I'd be quite keen to find out why that is as well, because the original coffee drinkers certainly didn't put milk in it. When did we start putting milk in coffee?
If you know the answer to that, please let us know. Send us a message. How many cups of tea do you drink per day, do you think?
It varies. I definitely drink more tea when I'm in Britain or Ireland than in Spain, because it's linked to culture. There seem to be more opportunities. Also, tea is warm and it's very often cool or cold in Britain or Ireland. So the idea of a nice hot cup of tea is very appealing.
Also, the tea tends to be better in Ireland and the coffee tends to be better in Spain. So that's another rule of thumb, is to drink tea in the UK and coffee in Spain.
Yeah. I would say in Spain I drink 2 cups a day, maybe 3. And in the UK between 3 and 5 a day. What about you?
I tend to drink more coffee than tea. I don't drink tea every day, but I do like decaffeinated tea in the evenings with dinner. So maybe a cup of decaffeinated tea so that I don't have trouble sleeping. But my favourite tea is the tea you brought me over from Belfast, the Punjana tea made by Thompson. So there's a recommendation for you. If you won't find it in Spain, I don't think, but you probably find it on the internet. I've seen it on Amazon. It's a very, very strong black tea that has a wonderful flavour, and it's now my favourite tea.
Yes, it's a good blend. One of those tea bags will easily make 4, probably 5 cups of strong tea.
It's builder's tea. It's very strong. What's your favourite tea? Are you a tea drinker? If you have anything tea related that you'd like to send us, please send us your voice messages to speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast.
Or if you'd prefer to write to us, you could send us an email. You could get Craig at inglespodcast.com, or write to me, belfastreza@gmail.com.
We have downloadable courses on the Mansion Ingles website. Go to store.mansioningles.net. And before we go, we'd like to thank our patrons who continue to support us on the Patreon website. If you would like to join our team of wonderful supporters, go to Patreon, patreon.com/Ingles podcast. And for as little as $1 per month, you can join the Patreons and get instant access to total transcriptions of recent podcasts that have been transcribed very professionally by Angelica.
Craig, what have we got coming up in next week's episode?
We're hoping to have a special guest next week, and if we do, we'll be speaking about vegans and vegetarians. So hopefully we'll have our special guest with us and we'll do that. If not, we'll probably speak about something else. Until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pits. The track is called See You Later.